things went wrong. She called the doctor, was supposed to be the backup doctor, but wasn't the backup doctor at all. And he said, get to the nearest hospital. That was what he said. Take her to the nearest hospital. And she was like, can you take us to Denver? And he's like, if you're near this hospital, come over here. We passed a hospital and went to the hospital over there because she wanted to go to that hospital. And I know for a fact, other doctors here in town that have looked over my records and have been my doctors, they've all said, if you came into me, my hospital came into me while I was on call and this was whatever, I would have turned her in. Even if there's no laws here in Nevada, I still would have turned her in because that's whatever. But instead, she had us go to the one that the doctor is more nicer to the natural community. So then it was, so
What
then,
we
you know,
could
there's like
really
that sympathy.
use is we could use a mandated reporter kind of thing for midwives, honestly, because
I agree. If we had the reports, can you imagine if there was actually real documentation of the reporting of how many injuries, how many deaths, how much stuff is actually going on in all the different states? We would actually get laws. I've said if we can do anything in the state of Nevada, I wish that we could have proper reporting. That's all I would wish. Out of anything else, don't hand them a license. Don't hand them whatever. No, if we could do proper recording of like actually what's going on, going to the hospitals, at home, all these things that actually says this was supposed to be at a home with this midwife, with the names of everybody of whatever, but it ended up here. If we actually did that, people would actually take things serious because I've gone to try to change the laws here and it's kind of like, oh, it doesn't happen that often. And I'm like, actually it does. You just don't hear about it.
Right.
And the hospitals can only do so much because, well, the hospitals have a lot to do. They're actually doing their job. You know what I mean? So it's like they can't be babysitting these people that are whatever.
So anyhow, there's the story from a ways back. It came from the Oregon Midwifery website. I don't know if it's even in existence anymore, but the name of the midwife was Adele Rose. She took a woman on for a VBAC. It was one of those deals where the woman was in labor and things weren't progressing. So the midwife and her assistants said, oh, you need some alone time. And they nipped off without her to go do whatever those things they needed to do, left her to labor alone, came back. She was having all the classic signs of a uterine rupture. They ignored them for a little bit. Then they decided to transfer. And of course, they'd never called an ambulance. So she ends up, they drove her to the hospital. The baby was dead. It was a full rupture. She ended up in the ICU in bad shape. And the staff of the hospital reported the midwife. They asked the patient to report her midwife, and she refused. It was nearly a double fatality, and the woman would not report. And this is why I think a mandated reporter would be so useful, because we've seen it time and time again, especially in Australia, where they do the coroner's inquests. They talk to the families, and the families are like, oh, our midwife was fine. We don't have any reason to think she did us wrong. And it's like, yeah, that's okay, because at least they have the coroner's inquest where they can come up with the conclusion that, why, yes, your midwife did do you wrong, because we do not need your permission to do this.
No, I think it would be the best thing that could happen, like anywhere, really. I mean, like I've always said, if I could do anything, that's what I would do. And I think as far as like, when it comes to like, learning and all the things that they haven't done with my situation of what happened, my hospital, I found out later because I've friends now with some of the nurses that were on duty that day, or some of them that I've reached out to them because they were so amazing. The hospital staff was so amazing. It's not like what they tell you when you're pregnant in the natural community. They kind of almost make it like they're bad and they're going to treat us bad because we want these natural births, and they're kind of like against our birth or something. And when I went in, they were completely opposite. They were so compassionate. They were so loving, so caring. and so professional also. But the things that they did, but I found out later after they took my baby away when we were picked out our funeral and all this stuff, the head nurse that was there for everything, she grabbed the baby and she made all the nurses come by, all the staff go and look at him and said, look at this baby. This is why we train. This is why we're educated. This is why we go to school. This is why we do the things that we do. All the things that they're doing, all, the protocols, all the things that they're constantly doing to like update. She's like, this is why we do it, because we're preventing this. We are preventing this. And if we don't do it, we're the same as them. We're the same as these people that come in here with the train wreck. So I thought it was quite amazing that I was told about this from multiple staff members, that this is what the nurses did together, is that they got together, looked at my son and was like, we lose lives. We lose people if we are not properly trained, if we're not doing the things that we're supposed to be doing. So I really hold that, and like it's to me, I appreciate it in ways I can't even explain, because I felt like afterwards, like my baby didn't matter. And then to find out that the hospital actually do view all babies like they do matter, and all mothers as they matter. Like, it meant the world to me to hear that they were like, no, we're not doing that. We're not gonna, this is not good. This is not good. This is not how it should be. So I just really wish people knew, like, a person going into labor or delivery isn't like somebody that doesn't like babies and doesn't like mothers and doesn't like whatever. Like, they love their job and they work so hard. A lot of, like, the doctors are constantly on call and constantly going around with all, like, I just think people don't see the other side. Like, they are human beings that have like spent years and years just going to college and then going off and have to be a resident and then having to train in hospital and have to follow people around and do all this stuff. And then to say, I want to deliver babies, like, how they determine that. But I mean, a lot of the doctors that I know, they're really freaking good at it. And I'm glad that they're delivering babies, because they're amazing. And like, that's their thing. And it's one of those, like, they learn because they don't want to end up in that situation. Like, it does happen. And I hate that line, like, babies die in the hospital too. Yes, it does happen. But the chances of preventable death are so, so low. And there's a protocol too that families can follow going after if the situation was a preventable death. But majority of it's not preventable. It's just either the timing didn't work out or something was actually wrong. But at home, it's preventable. Like, these, unfortunately, my baby got checked out. They evaluated me and my baby to put into the report. I'm in the report because they evaluated my actual health, my blood, all this stuff, to make sure that my body was even healthy too. But nobody talks about that's actually in there. Is like, it's not what it is, I guess you could say. But it's really sad that we have this community that's really pointing at this one that worked so hard to do the things that they do and to save lives like they do. And then we have these other ones that they don't do anything and they're making a lot more money and they're going off with their business with their hashtags, I guess you could say. It's just their hashtags of their different types of birth that they're like, hero, like, oh God.
They don't see complications. They see hashtags. Like, every complication is potential for more followers.
It's like, I had a prolonged shoulder dystocia and had to resuscitate a flat baby. And how awesome am I that I could do that? It's like, no, because in a hospital, one, you wouldn't have been doing it by yourself. Someone else would have been taking the baby to resuscitate it, who knew what they were doing and had the equipment. And then baby would go to a NICU to be assessed to make sure they were really okay. And so would the mom. So, I worked in a pediatric hospital, and honestly, the one thing I was thinking about today specifically is how they talk about, well, these things don't happen very often and babies die in hospitals too. And I realized that what they're saying when they say that is, these things don't matter. The babies who die in hospitals don't matter. The babies who die at home births don't matter. And I worked in a pediatric hospital, and all of our families mattered to us, and all of the children mattered to us. It's just mind-boggling that it took me so long to realize it, because it's so foreign to me to think that if a child dies, it didn't matter.
Well, I think it's about that particular phrase of babies die all the time, blah, blah, blah. One of the things that you don't realize and you don't think about what it means that babies die all the time until you're the parent of a perfectly healthy full-term baby that died in childbirth. Like how Danielle was saying, her thing would be changing the reporting. My big thing is I want to get the name changed. I no longer want my son to be considered a stillbirth. My son was a birth death. It indicates he was perfectly healthy until labor started and something happened in labor, because those statistics about babies dying in hospitals all the time, those babies are like the patients that midwives have to get rid of because it's too complicated, and that you might have a midwife who won't let you have a baby that is not doing well in utero. You have the people who have like 27-week miscarriages. You have the people who have the cord accidents, all of them being wrapped up in this same statistic. But when you're talking about the type of death that is experienced in midwifery, it is almost unheard of in hospitals.
Yes.
My counselor that I spoke about earlier, she's out of one of our Catholic hospitals that we have here, but she's affiliated with all of the local hospitals. So any parents of any baby who die in between, I think, 18 weeks and I think like 6 weeks after birth, that's who gets referred to her. So she sees, at least on paper in front of her, every death like my son, every death of babies in our city. And she told me in her 10 years of working, she has only ever encountered 2 deaths from the 5 baby hospitals that we have in the region. She's only ever seen 2 deaths in 10 years that are anywhere similar to my son's death, but midwife deaths similar to my son's death frequently. Yeah. Babies do not die in hospitals almost ever the way that my son died, the way that Danielle's son died. It just doesn't happen. It's a lie to say that. It's not even like buttering up the truth and manipulating the truth. It is a lie to act as if our stories are anything like other stillbirth stories.
And you know what? When you just brought that up, that's the other thing of why nobody knows about us, why nobody knows that babies are dying, is because if you have a stillborn, that means your baby did not take a breath. People don't understand what that term actually means. Stillborn does not mean your baby was not a baby, but because of what our science and what our laws are, your baby's treated almost like a fetus and not a human being. And that's what I don't like about it, is that we don't get a death certificate that is traditional to if we were to die. Like our babies are seen as more of like a fetus instead of, even though they were full grown babies that should have came out and would have been fine. But because they didn't take one breath, mine came out. When he came out, I heard them say, "Hi, baby." He was alive. He had a heartbeat, but he had so much meconium in his lungs, they could not get it out fast enough for him to actually take a breath. And that's what happened. So I do think that needs to be changed in all states. If there is miscarriage, and I do understand that, but when we get to a certain level, which doctors have a certain level, like when I went for my next child, they were like, once you hit, I think it was like 35 weeks or something like that, baby can come out anytime and you're fine and you don't need NICU. Like you're fine. It's a grown baby. Even if they're smaller than what it would be at 40 weeks, it's still, they're grown. But it's like, if we determine the medical people determined like, this is a date, this is whatever, once we pass this, they are babies no matter what happens. If they die in there, they are still a baby and they still get a death certificate, and we still should investigate them, whether it's medical or it's at home. I think that would make such a difference, because people would actually view our babies as babies. That's what always has irked me, is that they view it as like we had stillborns. But that's not what it was. There was signs, there was things, and it was preventable. The biggest word that I could ever throw in people's faces is it was preventable. This wasn't normal. This wasn't like a normal, like my body just let go or whatever, or my body gave up. This is a preventable death that now is labeled a stillborn because he didn't take a breath. So therefore he's like not a human being, but he's still a human being. He's still a baby. So I do agree. I think that goes right in hand with reporting. If we change that, where now they get a certificate, they get a death certificate. These ones where the midwives are basically letting you birth at home or in a birth center until suddenly there's no heartbeat. And now we'll take you to the hospital for a transfer. Those should be counted. And that's probably how they're sliding under the radar, is because they probably do know that. Unfortunately, they do know the laws. They do all work together. So they probably know if baby's not born breathing or baby doesn't take a breath, that majority of cases, like lawyers don't even want to take the case because it's not like it's a baby. Even my lawyer told me that. He was like, if your baby took one breath and died, right there is like $1 million, just that one breath. That's what my lawyer told me. So, I mean, I'm hearing it from the medical people. I'm hearing it from other mothers who've lost, full-term babies and stuff. And it's like, that needs to be changed. That's part of recording how we would actually be able to keep track of them, whether it was 35 or, or whatever it is, like, or 42, like, these are babies. These are real babies. And I do think you're right. We need to change that. That needs to be changed in all the states, because if that just right there was changed, that's part of the reporting side that we can actually be like, look, this is happening. It's not just me with the bad midwife one time a decade. Like, this is really, really happening.
I would like
yes,
it be somewhere between like the onset of labor and 48 hours post birth. If a mother or baby dies between the onset of labor and that 48 hours after birth, it should be considered a birth related death and investigated as such. Because that's one of the things, like, I will never know. Have any of the babies born with my midwife died of SIDS 3 or 4 days after being born? Was that SIDS? If that happens, because I know it happens. I know that there have been a lot of babies in the United States who were born at home with complicated deliveries. They don't get referred to a hospital. They don't get referred to a NICU. They don't get referred to a pediatrician. Heck, my midwife is now doing the first 2 appointments with the baby. Like, your baby's born, they get evaluated, they get a 24-hour evaluation. Mom and baby get a 24-hour evaluation. And then, like, at the 6-week postpartum checkup, I've been told now the midwife does that for the baby too. They are not pediatricians.